I wanted to share my tips on triangle pose, teaching triangle pose, specifically why I do not use a block, and then other things that follow on as a result of that. I'm teaching triangle pose for the purposes of looking at how this pose can be more functional in the body, not so forceful, and this does require a lot of forceful flexibility, especially when students are striving to get their hand down to the floor or a block. It's still not ideal because a lot of students are going to have to disengage in order to get the hand either down to a block or down to the floor. And even those students that don't think that they have to disengage or they still can find engagement, there's a lot of hypermobility that's going on when you just look at the angle of the leg here. The angle here, look at how close my thigh is to my waist. Unless this is something that you're moving through and practicing a lot, even me being able to do that there, it's still creating a lot of hypermobility when I'm down in that type of pose because of the way gravity is playing a role, because of the force, because of the weight of the torso that this area of the body is having to endure and take the weight of. So I am focusing on teaching this pose through the lens of accessibility, of mobility, of structural integrity in the body, and supporting students in their long-term practice, not just doing something right now and, for the look of it. It's not about the performance, it's about the function and the purpose. So I'm going to start just very quickly from the ground up. When I teach a pose like this, I'm doing probably what most teachers are doing and aligning the heels. I do like to offer something slightly different within the front foot, which is the option to have the foot slightly curved in, particularly because I cue to bend this knee. Even if someone is able to do this with a straight leg, I still don't cue to straighten the leg simply because it's very forceful on the joints. And the body will have natural musculature engagement when we allow for a bend in the knee. And sometimes that's helped and supported by curving this front foot in a little bit more. Then we move to the hips and to the legs. I am focusing on a natural hip placement for students. I don't focus on flattening the hips and turning them here. This is not accessible for most people, and for those people that it is accessible, they are likely exacerbating their hypermobility, and that is not sustainable. So I let my students find more of a natural hip placement, and when they do that, most people want to have their hips turn slightly towards this front leg. So this is my right leg. Now, as we know with a triangle pose, what's happening? The torso is, I'm just turning my hips for the purposes of this, of demonstrating this, the torso is side on, right? So if the hips are naturally turning, what does that mean? We have to turn the torso now in the opposite direction, okay, to make this more functional, more sustainable, and less about performance and show and correct alignment. So as those hips turn a little bit naturally towards the front foot, then we want to encourage the torso to turn the opposite way. And this is one thing that is super helpful for that, and that is internally rotating this front arm. And I'm going to tell you why that is effective. When we walk, our arm naturally, the one that swings forward, the shoulder just mildly even will rotate inward. Some people it's a lot and that's too extreme, yeah? But we're certainly not going like this. That is not our natural gait cycle. Our natural gait cycle is to have a little bit of twist, which is accompanied by a little bit of internal shoulder rotation. So knowing that, when we internally rotate the shoulder, there is naturally a spine twist that is occurring. And that is why I include in this triangle pose an internal rotation and a flipping of the palm of this front arm, because it naturally rotates the spine in the opposite direction that the hips will naturally want to go. So with that, this is how I like to cue it. I get my students to start by reaching the arms out to the side. And I will just preface this by saying, if you're struggling with how do I incorporate and teach my students what internal rotation of the shoulder is, it's too complex, Janelle. It's not. It's simple, and the reason why is because you introduce it in very simple ways prior to ever doing this pose in that sequence. So by the time you get your students to this pose, They know. It's not a mystery. There's no confusion. I mean, there might be, but you can't control that. You do as much as you can to introduce the concept of shoulder internal rotation to them before you get to this pose. So then when they get there, they have a much higher chance of knowing what you're talking about. So I get them to take this front palm, and I say, take your right hand and start to turn your palm so it faces down, and then start to turn your shoulder in, and as you do, turn your gaze towards your back left hand and start to twist your spine. Now notice if your hips are going with it. We want to keep the hips stationary towards that natural angle of them turning slightly towards this front right foot. But we're going to take the upper body and we're going to do the opposite. So we've got this corkscrew, kind of this twisting, wringing out effect going on. And that is helped by rotating this front shoulder arm in and turning the gaze towards the back hand. Now, what we see a lot of in a pose like this is that your students are here and the arm is in front, and then we try and correct to twist this back and reach and open the chest, and then you see a lot of this going on. The shoulder has not moved, but the arm has moved. And this is not really effective in order to provide the musculature to support that movement. So what you get your students to do is get them to move through the arm positioning before they get down. And again, it doesn't matter if they get down, right? The benefits aren't happening the moment they touch a block or the moment they touch the floor. In fact, as I already established and said, there's a lot of disengagement that occurs when students get that low to the ground. There's just a very forceful angle on this front leg hip. So instead, we emphasize the extension. So we've got internal rotation as the gaze swaps towards that back hand. And then there's the length through the wingspan and the length up and out of the waist at the same time. And then as they lean, there's a little tip, a little tip, a little tip. And for me, I don't want to go any farther because I can feel that I'm going to start to force my flexibility if I do that, and I'm going to disengage. I can feel that I am required to go into a passivity, and when we go into passive stretching like that, that's when we start to compromise the joints. So I would stay here. And in this position, it's very accessible for me to reach my arm up above me, and I can always come back to that point easily. But if we're trying to teach our students to go at it from getting down first and then correcting that arm, it's not going to work. Start from upright with the length, with the internal rotation, with the turn of the gaze, and then the lean. And they're only going as low as they can hold it with their musculature, not to the point where they're dipping, collapsing into the joints. And anyone who's touching their hand to the floor or even their hand to a block, I can guarantee you they're collapsing into the joints. So we're not overextending into this leg by really lowering the body down. Instead, we're getting our students to find the length, find the space, and maintain the space as they move and extend. And there, for me, that's where I will stay. I'm continuously attempting to twist my upper body up and allowing my hips to stay in that spot. This is not overstretching. It's active and it's quite supported. I have the bend in the knee, and I can choose to turn my gaze down if I want to. I can choose to have my gaze forward. You might even have students have a bend into the elbow, as this can be really helpful if extending that arm might not work. But usually the extension of the arm not working is because the shoulder is like this. Whereas when you start your students upright, then the shoulder has the potential to stack and lift, which means that the arm doesn't have to try and be yanked and forced back. So these are my tips for triangle pose. There's so many great tips out there, but this is the lens that I'm looking at it through, is the functionality, the sustainability, and the accessibility. So if you liked this video and you want to learn more about how to adapt asana for your students so it's more functional, it's more accessible, and it's more sustainable, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to my channel for more just like this.